Buchner's book, The Magnificent Defeat, he tells a story that he calls, and that I would agree with him, is almost too awful to tell. More poignant to me now that I am a dad, I have to tell you. It's a true story about a boy who's 13 years old, and in a fit of rage and depression, one evening in his house, grabbed a hold of his dad's gun and shot his own father and killed him. When the authorities asked the boy why he had done this, why he had killed his own father, he said that it was because he could not stand his father. His father demanded too much of him, and he was always getting on him, and he hated his father for this. Later on, after he had been placed in a house of detention, he'd gone through the system and been found guilty, as he confessed that he had done this, and they knew that he had done this. He'd been placed in detention. The story goes that one night, as a guard was walking down the hall, down the corridor late at night, he heard something coming from this young man's, this gasping and this sobbing coming from this young man's cell. And so as he approached the cell to hear from this detention room that the boy was in, as he approached it to hear what was going on and to check on the boy, he heard over and over and over again the boy crying out, "I want my father, I want my father." He'd taken his own father's life, and now he was miserable for doing it. As our world, as our society, have we too in many ways killed off our father, and do we now weep for him without even fully realizing what we're weeping about? Could it be our confused behavior on this planet? Could it be some of the decisions that we make and some of the choices that we make? Could this be because we're acting out of a deep sense of loss? We don't realize the loss that has actually occurred in our lives. In some way, maybe not using those exact words, but in some ways, are we crying out also, "I want my father, I want my father"? I wonder if that's true of atheism as well, those who refer to themselves as atheists. Although no doubt atheists would probably protest, well, how can you weep for something? How can you desire something or care for something that you don't even believe exists? But I sometimes wonder if they protest too loudly. I remember one of my friends is an atheist. She called me one morning and she said, "Chad, for a few minutes last night I was a Christian." I said, "Really?" I said, "What happened?" She said, "Our plane literally was plunging out of the sky. They told us to get in the crest position. The things fell down, the air, whatever those things are called. What are those things called? The mask. Put on your child first, yourself second, or yourself first, your child second. All the times I fly it, I still don't know how to do it. Anyways, and I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah." And in that moment, I thought to myself, what if there is a God? And she said, and I prayed. She goes, "But don't worry. Now I'm back on the ground and I've regained my sanity." I wonder if maybe sometimes those who claim to be atheists protest too loudly. After referencing the Holocaust and the Rwanda genocide and the smallpox epidemic of the 20th century, things that have killed millions and millions of people, the atheist writer Sam Harris, in his book Letter to a Christian Nation, presses the obvious question. This is what Sam Harris wrote. This is an atheist writing. "Of course, people of all faiths regularly assure one another that God is not responsible for human suffering. But how else can we understand the claim that God is both omniscient, all-knowing, and omnipotent, all-powerful? This is the age-old question of theodicy. Of course, this is the age-old question of theodicy, of course. And we should consider it solved. If God exists, either he can do nothing to stop the most egregious calamities, or he does not care to. God, therefore, is either impotent or evil." Theodicy, the word in there, theodicy, is a word that comes from two Greek words, theos meaning God, and dike meaning justice. So defending a good God in an evil world. So this is what he's talking about there. He's saying, this is true. This is the age-old question of theodicy. In other words, the age-old question of those who try to defend a good God in an evil world. Gregory Boyd, who's a theist, who is a believer in God, he said this: one of the chief problems in the Western philosophical tradition is reconciling the presence of evil with an all-good and all-powerful God. The problem, in a nutshell, is that if God is all-powerful, it seems he must have the ability to stop evil if he wants to. And if God is all good, it seems he would want to, and yet evil persists. What shall we say then? These are large questions. These are fair questions. These are accurate questions. They're questions that both believers and non-believers struggle with. It's not just the atheists that pose these questions. Those of us that believe in God pose these questions as well. How can this evil take place? How can this suffering take place? Because there isn't even one of us, even those of you that are very young in age, which is the majority of you, and even I'm very young in age compared to many people. But even those of us that are young in age, all of us have experienced and suffered some sort of deep pain. We've all suffered in some way. Whether it's the bullying of a friend or the hurt of a friend, whether it's the divorce of our parents, the fighting of our parents, whether it's the feeling of rejection, even just the pain of feeling not good enough. We're struggling with school and we're questioning, can I make it? Can I do it? All of us, no matter who we are in life, we all have felt some deep pain. Years ago, there was a cartoon in the New Yorker magazine of a preacher, and he was in his clerical robe, and he was standing behind his pulpit with his hand to his neck and saying, "We've gathered together this morning because we've all had it up to here." And that's the truth. We've all had it up to here. It doesn't matter what age you are, really. All of us in this room probably have suffered things that we're just tired of dealing with. There isn't an atheist or a theist who hasn't felt like there's just too much going on in this world. And how could there then be a God with such awful suffering here below? How could a God actually exist if there's so much suffering here below? And if there were a God, a good and mighty and powerful God, wouldn't this God want to stop the suffering? And if he doesn't stop the suffering, then who would want to follow this God? Who would want to follow a God that doesn't stop the evil in the world? That's why my friend Matt, when I was in college, he was a kid with a sharp mind. He was actually a brilliant mind. He was gifted in ministry. He was studying to be a pastor. And he was speaking all over the country to young people and going all over the place. He was leading many people to Christ, but in his private life, there was a lot of struggles going on. There were struggles in his family, struggles with his parents, struggles with his own personal relationship, struggles with his relationship with his girlfriend, who was also a friend of mine. And through all this, he was saying, why aren't these things going away? And after suffering so much in his own life, there were some other things that were much deeper and much darker that I won't get into. But after suffering all of this in his own life, he started to lose sight of everything. And finally he said, I cannot reconcile this. I cannot reconcile my pain and what he was experiencing with a loving God. And he said, if I can't reconcile it, there must therefore be no God. And that friend of mine who was studying to be a pastor and gifted in so many ways is now a complete disbeliever in God. What shall we answer? What shall we say to Matt and people like Matt? If God is as benevolent and wise and good as we said yesterday, that he's the maker of beauty, he's the maker of design, he's the maker of love, if he's as good as all this, then why is there so much universal brokenness in the world around us? And why is there so much hurt in our own hearts? Why is there such universal hurt inside each one of us? And we wonder how to correlate the reality of human suffering with the notion of a loving God. Consider for a moment the disarmingly short verse in the Scripture, 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 4, which says, love suffers long. Love suffers long, but how long do we have to suffer? How long does this go on? Any defense of a good God in an evil world, theodicy, must tell the story. Must tell the story about how it all began. Once upon a time, there was a very loving father with a very happy family, a very close family, a very tight-knit family. All the father's children were equal and enjoyed the love of the father. Some children lived within the father's house. Other children of the father lived far away. They were in other galaxies and planets and scattered across near and far. It was a very happy family with a very loving father, perhaps like the father you grew up with, or perhaps not like the father you grew up with, but you wished you had. It was a happy home. And the father's eldest child, he was the beautiful and happy son until something terribly awful happened. Something terribly wrong took place. You can feel it in these last 6 words, or in these 6 words here from Revelation chapter 12 and verse 7. And war broke out in heaven. And war broke out in heaven. Long before director George Lucas swept the world with his blockbuster intergalactic trilogy, the Star Wars, which we heard the music this morning, and we all recognize that music. And who is it? J.J. Abrams. He's doing the newest one. Is that right? Am I correct in that? J.J. Abrams is doing the newest one, which we all hope is better than the 3 prequels that came out after the original 3. Does anyone like the next 3 more than the original 3? Someone does. A few of you do. It's probably the generational thing. The first movie I ever saw in a theater was Return of the Jedi. I think 1985, 1986. I was about 7 or 8 years old. It was the very first movie I ever saw was Return of the Jedi. And I was blown away for 2 things. 1, I couldn't believe my parents let me go to the movie theater. And 2, I couldn't believe they took me to Star Wars. 3, I just was blown away at how cool it was. I thought it was awesome. But George Lucas turned this sci-fi world into household themes long before Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker clashed and slashed their green and red lightsabers in combat, long before Darth Vader fell and said, "Luke, I'm your father," and all the rest of it. Tonight we must go back long before that, make-believe, when there was actually truly a real Star Wars in heaven. Revelation 12 and verse 7, and war broke out in heaven. There was a true intergalactic conflict that took place. In the perfect paradise, in a place called heaven, war broke out. Long before war broke out in your homes, long before war broke out in your parents' marriages, long before war broke out with your siblings, long before war broke out with any of your classmates, long before there was any war in our neighborhoods, there was war in heaven. Which means that today there is no living being on this planet. There is no living being on this planet or in this universe that is not in some way a victim of this original war that broke out in heaven. You know, I've stood at Ground Zero. I don't know if any of you have been there. And I've literally wept at that place. I remember the day that 9/11 happened in 2001, and as I was watching the towers, and all I could think about was all these people that died in that moment. I just wept there. But then a few years later, just a couple years ago, my wife and I went to Ground Zero, and we were walking there, and they have this giant, if you haven't been there, they have this hole that goes down, and the water flows over, and you can't see the water go down. It's just this eerie thing of this. It symbolizes the buildings crumbling and going down into the abyss. We're reading though, and I noticed that there's some of the names that were in gold. There's some of the names. They have all the names of all the people that died, and they're in gold. And I was wondering, why are these names in gold? And then I got a thing, and I began to read about it, and all the names in gold were all the mothers that were pregnant and had babies in them and died. I stood at Ground Zero and I wept. I wept when I read that. I've been to the Alfred P. Murrow building. And if you've been there, where the Timothy McVeigh in Oklahoma City, and Timothy McVeigh, this was when I was a sophomore, I think in high school, junior in high school, He blew up this building in Oklahoma City. And their memorial has these chairs sitting out that symbolize the different people that died. And there at the front of these are all these little chairs only about this high. Because underneath the Alfred P. Murrow building was a child care center for those people. And a large percentage of the individuals that died were little kids. We're all affected by war. These things touch our hearts. These things touch our hearts. I've heard stories about my own grandfather. My own grandfather, World War II vet. My grandma told me stories about how when he came back from the war, from World War II, served in North Africa and some of those places, that when a car would backfire, he would dive out of bed and crawl under the bed. And he couldn't stop shaking. People have been affected by these things. I lived in Southern California during the LA riots. Lived within 20-some minutes of a store that was looted. It was a scary time in which we lived there. We're still affected weekly hearing of the loss of life. Up in Baltimore this year, there's been more people killed this year than since, I think, 1972. Same in Washington, D.C. We're still hearing of loss of life in the protracted senseless wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. We maybe try to ignore the number of more than 347,000 dead people in Syria's civil war. 12,517 of them children 10 years old or younger. We're all affected by war, and so was heaven. The original war broke out in heaven, and it's caused tragedy. But who is responsible for this? Who is this fallen star that's spoken of in the Bible who would dare to war against God, who is the intelligent designer of the universe, the same God who does everything to win back our friendship? Who would dare to challenge him? Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 through 9. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 through 9. The apocalyptic dragon, who is he? I'm well aware that the media today would like they popularized the notion that whoever this dragon is, that he is not that dangerous. In fact, many cartoon characters form of this guy, and just recently we had Halloween, and you saw a number of children. I saw a number of pictures of children dressed up like this little funny-looking cartoonish being that doesn't look any more intimidating than my 3-year-old son. Not to worry, the modern world tells you it's not that bad. They also paint very horrible pictures of who the devil is, but they tell you, oh, it's nothing, but it's just make-believe. It's just stuff on a movie. Stuff on a movie. And people have come to not even believe in this dragon, or not even to believe that there is a dragon. Even many that believe in God. Many that believe in God no longer believe in the devil. A poll that was taken just back a couple years ago in December of 2013 found that while 74% of Americans believe in God, only 58% of Americans actually believe in an evil power known as the devil. A dramatic decline even from just the last decade. There is no devil, the experts sniff. Even those that believe in God doubt that there is a devil. And the people are believing them. And whether we actually believe them or not, we almost treat it like it's true. We act like if there is no devil. Not unlike the bandit in China who would lurk in the mountains of China, waiting until the peasants brought their crops to the harvest. And then when they brought their crops to the harvest, he would sweep down with his cohorts and pillage their freshly harvested grain. And he would do this over and over and over again. Finally, the villagers became wise, and they put up traps for the robbers so that they could stop this bandit from capturing their grain and hurting their business. And they drove him away, and they thought that he was gone. And the robber became very wise. The bandit became very wise. he found an old man. He said, I will give you this much money if you go down to the village and you tell them that the bandit is dead, that the robber is dead. And so the old man did as he requested, and he went down, and everyone celebrated. He's dead, he's dead. We no longer have to deal with him. A few nights later, there was the bandit again, pillaging their goods again and harming them once again. That's the truth of the devil. That is what the devil does. Not only does the devil not want you to believe in God, but the devil doesn't want you to believe in him. He knows that if you believe in God but you don't believe in him, he has an advantage. The devil has several schemes of how he does this. He says the devil is nothing more than a figment of neurotic and weak imaginations that strong, healthy people don't need to blame Satan for their faults. He hisses in our ear, there's no such thing as me, which is his way of putting us to sleep before he fatally strikes us, before he comes after us. So who is the devil? Who is this infamous dragon, this great red dragon found in the book of Revelation? The Bible tells us in Ezekiel chapter 28. The Bible says, thus says the Lord God, you are the seal of perfection. This is a prophecy about the devil. You are a seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. On the day you were created, you were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of fiery stones. You were perfect in your ways from the day that you were created. From the day you were created. What do we know thus far about this being? The Bible tells us that this being, that he was created in the garden of God, the Garden of Eden, before it was down on this earth, but while it was still up in heaven. He was created at some point in the distant past of this universe, and clearly God was his creator. This being was elevated to the position of the anointed cherub who covers. This being, the cherubim are an angelic order of beings, with the covering cherubs being the two highest angels in the ranks. So this was one of the highest angels in the ranks. Clearly, whoever this being is no created being. No created being could be closer to God than this angel. This angel was the closest. You are perfect in your ways from the day you were created, the Bible says. But something snapped inside of that perfect angel, and everything began to change. Ezekiel chapter 28. You are perfect in your ways from the day you were created, till iniquity was found in you. And you sinned. Therefore I cast you as a profane thing out of the mountain of God. And I destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the fiery stones. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. I cast you to the ground. I laid you before kings, that they might gaze at you. That they might gaze at you. You were perfect till iniquity, till sin was found in you. What iniquity? What sin? If there was any doubt after this first portrait, there is no doubt when we stare into the second portrait. Isaiah chapter 14, this tells us what the sin is of Lucifer, the angel. Oh, how you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. I. The sin that led to the fall of this highest created being is the sin that is still the greatest in each and every one of our lives. The sin of self. The sin of I. He wanted, this solitary individual person was obsessed with himself, and he wanted to be like God. Folks, I've learned in my life, you should always be cautious of people that continually say, I. This is what I think. This is what I believe. This is what I know. This is what I want. This is what I... That's a dangerous ground to be upon. It's a dangerous ground to be upon. Especially for us as Christians. We should be mindful of that. This is a euphemism. I is a euphemism for self-worship. For self-worship. Self-worship was transformed this once perfect angel into an agent of deception and death. John chapter 8 and verse 44. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desire. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Jesus minces no words in unlocking Satan as the father of lies and the murderer from the beginning. All the evil that we see in this world is not because of God. It is because of Satan. It is because of someone that decided, you know what? I want to be like God. I want to make myself like God. And if I can't have it that way, then I'm going to try to destroy everybody else in my wake. But follow Christ's logic. It says Lucifer, who covets God's exalted position in the universe, has only one option if he would occupy that throne. He must first destroy God. He must first destroy God, which means he must resort to a devilish campaign. It says that he was a murderer, right? He was the first murderer. He was a murderer from the beginning, from the moment he became the devil. How did he become a murderer? Well, there's more than one way to murder somebody. There's more than one way to destroy somebody. We, of course, think about it in only the physical sense. We think about it in the physical sense. But truly, people can be murdered. Their reputations can be murdered. They can be destroyed. People can be accused of things, and things can never be the same again. I've seen this happen all the time. I remember kids that left school when I was your age because of something that took place and what people began to say about them, and that just matriculated to the point at which that person could no longer even function in that school anymore. I've seen that happen. I saw that happen to my math teacher. We had a math teacher. Her name was Michelle. I was one of the people who helped with this. I've since called her and apologized to her for this. She's, I think, somewhere up in the Northeast now. But she came to our school as a new teacher, and you know what? We just gave her all kinds of problems. We gave her all kinds of problems. And then we began to say horrible things about her, and go to our parents and say horrible things about her. And we go to our principal and say horrible things about her, to the point at which she no longer had any control. Now, you shouldn't do this to your teachers. Don't follow my example. But my point is we basically destroyed her in that community, and she had to leave. We can do these things. We can murder somebody in more ways than just a physical death. And the way in which the devil tried to murder God is by spreading lies about him, by rebelling against him, by saying that God was a liar, by accusing God of being a liar, when in fact he was the liar. Revelation 12, again, and war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Why would God not just destroy Satan immediately? Why would he not just destroy him immediately? He should have executed him on the spot. If God had destroyed him immediately and not let him come down to this earth, then none of us would be in the mess that we are in. None of us would be in the mess that we are in. This is a picture from the Vietnam War. Some of you may have seen it before. It's a famous picture where a suspected Viet Cong collaborator is taken into the streets of Saigon and executed right there. Why didn't God do simply the same thing to Lucifer? Why didn't he simply take him into the streets of heaven and execute him, shoot him in the head? Let's consider what this universe would have been left with if God had done that. Think about if God had done that, what this universe would have been left with. If God had instantly vanquished Lucifer out of existence. If the president of our country did something horrible, stole some money or did some horrible war crime, suppose one of his cabinet members ratted him out and said, you know what? You can't do this. But suppose when the president found out about this, he signed an executive order, an executive decree ordering the army generals to kill anybody that opposed him, to kill all those who were making the charges against him. Now, our country seems to protect against this, but there's been a lot of countries in history that have seemed to protect against this, and wicked and evil men have done this very thing. That with one stroke of a pen, suddenly a country that was at peace became a country of war. A country that seemed democratic became a country of oppression. It has happened all over the world. It hasn't happened to us, praise God. But with the elimination, President Obama was able to eliminate all opposition. I don't know if you've heard about the Obamacare. Anyone heard about Obamacare? A few of you have? So I don't know if you've heard, but there's a few people that are against Obamacare. Now, they accuse President Obama of overstepping his bounds. They accuse him of overstepping his reach in this bill. They accuse him of going against the Constitution. They've gone to Supreme Court all these times. Let's say President Obama said, you know what, generals, I want you to kill every single one of those people who say that I have gone against the laws of the land in implementing Obamacare. Let's say that the president had that power, and let's say that he did that. Now, if President Obama killed all of the opposition, all those that were accusing him of breaking the law when establishing this law, let me ask you a question. Would that in our minds confirm that President Obama was innocent, or that maybe he had something to hide? Let me ask you. Would we think that he was innocent in that? Yes or no? No? Okay, I see some heads shaking. Thank you for at least heads shaking. No, we wouldn't think he was innocent. In fact, if he did this, we would think he was more what? Guilty, right? We would think he was more guilty. Because if you kill your opposition, you risk substantiating your opposition's charges. And that's exactly what God faced. Satan was saying that God was unfair, that God was a liar, that God was harsh, that God was vindictive. If he had annihilated Satan on the spot when he said these things, what would have happened? All of heaven and all of the universe would have said, you know what? Satan was right. Satan was right. So God had to take the risk to let Lucifer live on and play out all the cards in his rebellious plan. He must let this fallen rebel angel prove himself to be the monster that he truly, truly is. The old proverb is true. Give a cat enough rope and it will hang itself. That is what is taking place in the world right now. Satan's rebellion must be allowed to mature in order for its evil harvest to be evident to every thinking observer. Let me say that. To every thinking observer. If God is truly love, he has no other choice but to let Satan play out his hand. That is why perfect love's perfect freedom meant that fallen Lucifer must be allowed to do what he could do. Then there was another story that followed that. Genesis chapter 3. Now the serpent was more cunning, this is the devil, than any beast of the field which the Lord had made. And he said to the woman, as God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden. And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. First of all, she quoted God wrong there. That is not actually what God said. But right here, let us be reminded of one of the great truths about God's character of love. In fact, it's the truth about all love. In order for love to really be love, it must not only grant us the right to say yes, it also must grant us the right to say no. For a long time, I wondered, why would God ever even put that tree in the garden? Why would God ever put that tree in the garden to even tempt them? Because in order for you to truly say yes to love, you have to have the right to say no. You have to have the opportunity even to say no. You wouldn't have the opportunity to say no if you didn't know that you could actually say no. In order for love to be love, it must not only grant you the right to say yes, it must also grant you the right to say love. Love that will not let you say no is not actually love. For love never operates by force. Just let me say this on a totally side note that has nothing to do with evangelism. If anyone in any relationship ever says to you, if you don't do this, or if you do this, then I will whatever, then immediately kick that person to the curb and that relationship to the curb, no matter what. Because that is not the way love operates. That is not the way love operates. Love is free, and love never operates by force. Everyone who's tried to win the heart of another person knows this. They know that they have to woo that person. They have to impress that person. I used to be the master of mixtapes. Anyone know what a mixtape is in here? Man, I was the master of the mixtapes. You could get Green Day Dookie on a tape along with like Barbra Streisand. I mean, I had the whole gamut of things of all kinds of music on there. Man, I'd have from Metallica and Guns N' Roses, GNR, all the way to Celine Dion and Mariah Carey, all on one tape. I mean, I was the master of the mixtape. I was great at these things. And so when I started, courting my wife, trying to get my wife to be impressed, I'd make her these mixed CDs. I didn't put any Metallica and Guns N' Roses on by that point, and also she would have freaked out, I think, a little bit. But I'd make these CDs and all this just collection. I made, I think, about 15 CDs. I had Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3 of all country, because she liked country. So I went and found all the country, Volume 1, I was the master. This was one, because I wanted to woo her. I wanted to impress her. I started eating ice cream. I love eating ice cream now, but I used to not eat ice cream. Yesterday I ate ice cream alone. That's how far I've fallen from good graces. But I used to never eat ice cream, but I would go and I would eat ice cream because this is what made her happy. I didn't like to eat Thai food. I now love Thai food, but I didn't like to eat Thai food. But this is what she enjoyed eating. You do these things to try to impress. You try to woo. You try to win their hearts. Love is won. Love is not forced. And God knew that. God understood that. And so he had to put in that tree a freedom of choice. A freedom of choice. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you shall eat of it, you shall surely die. You have a choice, God said. You have a choice, because I want you to love me out of your own free will, out of your own free choice. I want you to love me. Unfortunately, even though they were in a beautiful place, in a perfect garden, they were there in that garden, and they chose wrong. Freedom to choose, freedom of choice, is love's highest value. The tragedy wasn't their freedom to choose. The tragedy was their choice to be free from God. They chose to be free from God, and so it was that they made a choice to eat from that fruit. The Bible tells us that when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. And Adam and Eve joined Lucifer in his rebellion against God, the God of love and the God of law. And every child ever born, every one of us, including you and me, has joined in that same rebellion and has been plunged in the crossfire of the Star Wars. Every child that has ever been born. And we have all fallen for his lies. We've all fallen for the lies of the devil. Again, the question deserves asking. Since God knew, as he did from the beginning, why then did he not just destroy Adam and Eve? Why did he not just destroy Adam and Eve? Same reason he couldn't just destroy God. If love is the end, freedom must be the means to that end. God had to give them a choice, a freedom to choose him. A freedom to choose him. C.S. Lewis, who many of you know of as a great Christian apologist, C.S. Lewis was actually an atheist. To those of you that may not know that, C.S. Lewis was an atheist, and he began to read the Bible, and as he read the Bible, he eventually became a Christian. And in his classic apology, Mere Christianity, he writes this: one of the things that surprised me when I first read the New Testament seriously, there's a key word there, one of the things that surprised me when I first read the New Testament seriously, was that it talks so much about a dark power in the universe, a mighty evil spirit who is held to be the power behind death and disease and sin. Christianity thinks this dark power was created by God and was good when he was created and went wrong. Christianity agrees with dualism that this universe is at war, but it does not think this is a war between independent powers. It does not think it is a war between independent powers. It thinks it is a civil war, a rebellion, and that we are living in a part of the universe occupied by the rebel. There was war in heaven, and now there is war on earth. And the picture of its bloody and evil carnage are written large across the canvas of history. Hospitals, and graveyards all over the place. There's all kinds of images that remind us that this world is full of evil. Young kids having to choose or being pushed to choose between mom and dad. Children starving. All kinds of things. There are several deceptions by the devil. Deception number 1. Those who believe blame God. God has done this to me, to us. Curse God and die. This is what Satan tries to get us to do. Those who believe in God, they blame God for things. Deception number 2. Those who do not believe say there is no God. They say this is all the brute chance of nature's random selection. Suffering has always been part of earth, life. No creator, no God. Deception number 3. There is no devil. For if there is no God, then there can be no devil. And if there is no devil, then they say, then I am on my own. I am my own God and my own worst enemy, unwittingly, unknowingly, unconsciously under the control of this fallen angel. And y'all, I want to pause here right for a second. I just want to say this. This right here is what ultimately atheism leads to. It leads to tearing down oneself. And I can tell you that because my friend Chris on February 2 of this year, he'd gone to that place. He was raised believing in a God, raised to follow God, but in his life, in his world, the choices that he made were so bad. And he got to the place where he felt he was no good. He had a daughter on the way. His girlfriend was 6 months pregnant. And my friend Chris got into the back of his Honda Accord and he drove to a rest stop on the 75 freeway in Ohio. He crawled in the back seat of that Honda Accord and he shot himself in the head. You know what his mom told me? His mom told me, the hardest thing is if there is no God, then I'm just not good enough. He said. He didn't believe he was good enough to be a dad. That is what not believing in a God leads to. That is what the devil wants us to believe. If there is no God, then there can be no devil. And if there is no devil, then I am my own God and my own worst enemy, unwittingly, unknowingly, unconsciously under the control of the fallen enemy. And we say, we're our own worst enemy. I'm not good enough. What's the point in living? That's where my friend got to. He shot himself in the head. Folks, this is the decisions that we face. This is the genius of evil. The enemy has done this, Jesus said, and it is true. But when love suffers long, that is not just you and I that must suffer. That is the God of love and compassion that suffers as well. You know, God was in this perfect world, and he could have just stayed there